edition of the Art Lewis Show. Later on, after the 10 o'clock news, we'll have a couple of folks with us this morning to talk about the appearance of Captain Phillips in our area. Captain Phillips was the Maersk container ship captain that was hijacked off the Somali coast and rescued by the U.S. Navy. He will be making a speech. We'll find out more about that later on. And at 11 o'clock, we'll learn about the downtown restaurant investments from a group. But for this hour, coming up is Cinco de Mayo. And to talk about that and much more this morning, we welcome a man who you hear hosting a program here on WSGW. We say good morning to Larry Rodarte.
Good morning, Art.
Good
Thanks
morning, Larry.
for having me.
Mi Gente on Air is the show that you hear him on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday. A couple of things to talk about this morning, actually. I think first, and we do this all the time when we talk about it, but let's talk about Cinco de Mayo, its origin, and what it means to the Mexican community.
Well, from my perspective, I guess, I understand it that in Mexico there was a battle against the French army, and it was a ragtag Mexican army that was very much outnumbered by the French, and the Mexican army actually won. And so in the city of Pueblo, Mexico, they actually won that battle. And although they won the battle, they didn't win the war.
Yeah, yeah.
But the pride of the people, because they actually overcame the big French army, is what is celebrated even to this day in Pueblo, Mexico. Now, it's not really celebrated anywhere else in the country of Mexico, but Mexican Americans here in the United States have taken that holiday, which it is a holiday in Mexico, in Pueblo. We've taken,
but only in Pueblo.
Yes, we have taken that as kind of a pseudo holiday for Mexican Americans in this country.
So, in fact, we celebrate Cinco de Mayo in the United States far more than they do in Mexico.
Yes, isn't that something? Because September 16th, the Independence Day of Mexico, is what's vastly celebrated throughout that country.
Sure.
Yes,
which makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, and we celebrate it here too as well, and that's during Hispanic Heritage Month and all. But in Saginaw, Cinco de Mayo has become the main holiday, if you will, for Mexican Americans in the Great Lakes Bay region. And in terms of how we look at it with pride and all, it's really about celebrating the contributions of Mexican Americans in our area as well as our heritage and culture.
Which is huge. I mean, when we look at it historically, Larry, what brought the Mexican American population to Saginaw? Was it General Motors, like most things?
No, it actually wasn't. It was the migrant families that were working the fields. They all came from Texas, from Mexico. Some came under the Bracero program during the war, when the U.S. government hired men to go down and recruit Mexicans from Mexico as well as Mexican Americans in Texas, and they brought them all to the area. And they stayed because at the time General Motors started hiring men, and there was jobs, and they soon found that their American dream could be fulfilled if they lived here and stayed here in Saginaw because of the Gray Iron Foundry, and then ultimately the other plants that opened. And
some still stayed in agriculture too, because it's such a huge agricultural area.
Yeah, a lot of them, that was the life that they actually knew, and I think for many, they put their kids in the fields just to know what it was like to, work hard. What they knew, the parents, like my father, and they wanted them to build a good work ethic. Yeah. And there's no other way, I don't think, than working the actual fields. That's hard work in the sun, So
let's talk. You mentioned your dad. The Rodarte name was affiliated with construction for a long time. Did they bring that from Mexico, the family, at some point in time, or is that an acquired skill here?
It was an acquired skill. I think they had it so hard. My father's father died when my dad was 5, and my dad's brother Manuel was 7. So they were 5 and 7 when their father died. And so my grandmother, she brought 8 kids in a dump truck from Texas. A recruiter went down there. They brought them in a dump truck, the Anguiano family, and with other families, and they came back and forth from Saginaw, immigrating back and forth. And Dad and Uncle Manuel only got a 3rd grade education. And Dad was doing an apprenticeship later in life in Chicago, and his brothers called him and said, "Hey, why don't you come back and move to Saginaw and let's start building homes." And they were building a home for, the first home that they built was for owner of a grocery store. And that home is still standing today, and they were paid by giving my dad and my uncle and their families groceries.
Oh.
Can you believe that?
Yeah, I can, actually.
Yeah. And so before my father passed away in 2000, he took me back to that old home. And it was really amazing to me that house was built in 1957. And it was standing pretty good. And I took pictures of him, and I took pictures of myself because I wanted to show the other family members, my nephews, the legacy of their grandfather.
And they built a lot of homes after that.
Yeah, a lot.
A lot.
In Flint, in the Thumb, Bad Axe, they went, west, east. There were a lot of homes.
Just to finish this story up, when the U.S. goes down to Mexico and recruits to bring people to this country, they brought them into this country. How long before they got citizenship? Or was that part of the deal?
Oh no, it wasn't like the
part of the deal. Huh?
The Bracero program was, during World War II, and there were many that came. I remember talking to my dad about this, and he was a young man when he actually worked with some of the Braceros in Texas and in Saginaw. And those men, once that the war was over, they were sent right back. And some they eventually made their way back because they knew the opportunity of America. And one of them is Maria Jimenez Gomez, who owns Maria's Restaurant on State Street. Mm-hmm. Her father is 97 years old, still living. You can see him sitting in the restaurant on any given day there. And he's still strong-minded, strong-willed, and he was an actual bracero who is still living here in Saginaw.
Wow, so there are still some around. Not many.
No.
Yeah. Well, Larry's with us. We'll talk about Cinco de Mayo celebration. We're also going to talk about another anniversary of an organization, 80 years young. Stick around for that, and we will talk more with Larry after we take a break here on the Art Lewis Show. Right now, let me ask, how many times have you looked around and found it difficult to find products, quote, made in America? Well, now with the uncertainty of tariffs, it's becoming even more important. McDonald Ford, in anticipation of tariffs, stocked their lot with tariff-free vehicles, with many more en route. And not only are they tariff-free, but Ford is now offering employee pricing for everyone. That means you pay the same price as Ford employees. In addition, Chrysler and import buyers considering a Ford receive the lowest price offered. Chevy truck buyers can now get into a Ford F-150, also at employee pricing. So, you see, now is the right time to visit McDonald Ford, M47 in Freeland for the best selection and the lowest possible price. Don't let tariffs prevent you from getting the vehicle of your choice at a price you can afford. Visit McDonald Ford in Freeland today. Remember, tariff-free and employee pricing for everyone.
Progressive knows when you own a boat or
All right, we're back with you here in studio with me, Larry Rodarte, and coming up Cinco de Mayo this weekend and some other things to talk about. Let's stick with Cinco de Mayo first, though. You celebrated in many ways, including a parade. So let's start with the parade.
Yeah, we're really excited about the parade this year. It's the 46th annual, and we have a parade coordinator. Her name is Dolores Vasquez Cameron. It's her first time leading the parade, and she has been so gung-ho with Facebook posts and everything that she's got everybody really excited. And believe it or not, this is the first time we have closed entries because we have too many.
Really?
Can you believe that?
Wow.
I know. And so, we're
That's
really
great.
excited about that because it kind of relieves some of the pressure off of us that are organizing it. But there are still, I know, some that are calling in at the last minute trying to get in or whatever. But for the sake of the parade starting at 10:30 in the morning, we want to make sure it's done and over with by 12 noon because that's when the festivities start over at the Jolt Credit Union Event Park.
So what day is the parade? Let's start with that.
This Saturday, May 3rd, 2025 at 10:30 a.m. And it's going to start at Hoyt Park right there. The staging area will be at Hoyt Park coming out of the north end and then heading straight down Washington because of all the construction that's going on and in Court and that. So it's going straight down Washington all the way to Johnson, right there by the Dow Event Center. Yeah.
10:30 in the morning. All kinds of groups. Then, obviously, you got that bigger contingent.
And one of the things that I love seeing about it is that on a beautiful parade where you have jubilant participants, what I love seeing is that there's people of all walks. It's white, black, Hispanic, and everything in between, and it's just like a big celebration for Saginaw.
And this year you have it all to yourself. Last year, if I remember right, it was right smack at the beginning of the Memorial Cup.
Yeah.
It was a lot going on.
Yeah, and we didn't mind because it was great for Saginaw. Everything
it was. Oh, it was wonderful.
May was an incredible month, and I was really busy with participating in the food truck alley, and that was incredible to be welcoming Canadians and everyone else. But this year we're going to be ourselves having the parade. And, I want to invite everybody to come because it's a parade celebration for our, Hispanic culture, Mexican-American culture in the Great Lakes Bay region. But to me, it's for everybody to come out and basically welcome spring. It's coming out of winter. And if it's a beautiful day, which I'm hoping it's going to, it's saying cloudy, but I think it's going to maybe turn for us. It kind of always has. We've been really lucky. But I think that the participation that we have seen from the entrance, we've got dancers that are from, the African American community. We have the lowriders coming on with their cars. We have different church groups from all ethnicity. I mean, it's just like, it's not just a Hispanic parade anymore. And I think that, for it to have gone this long, 46 years, it was inevitable that would happen. And, I've seen, Detroit is probably the longest parade. They're celebrating 60 years for Cinco de Mayo, and we're right behind them at 46. And I think those are the two main ones in the state of Michigan.
So the parade ends at Jolt Park. The festivities begin.
Yep.
So what's happening at Jolt Park?
At Jolt Park, we got some great entertainment. A lot of some of our local bands. Champ Garcia, who has Conjunto Champs, Conjunto Tejano Music, Mexican music. And then we got a headliner named AJ Castillo, who is from Texas and is a young man that has just really been moving up the music charts. And he's got a new single that just came out on Monday. It is a real banger of a hit, and I think he's going to really light up the stage there at the Jolt Credit Union Event Park. The other thing is, in which I know attracts so many people, is we've got some of the best, I say, food trucks in the state of Michigan. We've got 10 of our, real culinary experts that continually support the Cinco de Mayo festival, and they're all going to be there. They're all excited because they know this is the big daddy of them all in terms of for food truck events. and they all do well. And then we also have the Ballet Folklorico dancers from Detroit that will be dancing, and they're an excellent group if you like folkloric dancing. Very vibrant, very colorful with their dresses, so that's the main entertainment. And then, of course, we've got merchant vendors that have different Mexican products, some from Mexico and some from local store owners.
Charge to get in?
$5. Simple, easy charge. And some may ask, why are we charging or whatever, but the expense of everything that we do there is really, from the Jolt Credit Union, from just having the parade in Saginaw. People don't understand how much they charge us to block off the streets. It's pretty expensive. I don't know if you want me to say it on the air, but I don't mind because we're very transparent about it. But it's $5,000.
Wow.
Yeah, it is. It's $5,000, and so we do have to charge because the facility's not cheap either for the Dow Event Center. But it's a great opportunity for those that are participating, say like the merchant vendors as well as the food vendors, because it really helps in the economy with all these food trucks. They are locally owned, and they do really well, and so it's their day to really shine.
And it runs until how long?
5 p.m. And then part of what we as the Union Civica have done this year, and we had this partnership prior to COVID, but now we're back in 2025 with the Soaring Eagle Casino, which we have as a partnership. They are actually having their big concert in the evening from 8 o'clock, where they have the group Signo, which is a huge group in Texas, and Los Palaminos. And so they're going to be performing in a concert there, and then they have an after party at the Soaring Eagle.
Yeah, so you have time to get there.
Yeah, in order for us to be in partnership with them, which the Soaring Eagle gives us a big sponsorship here for Saginaw Cinco de Mayo, we are inclusive of what they're doing, and we try to tell everybody to go over there, and we don't throw anything here in Saginaw like we had in the last previous 3 years because of COVID. So it's a great partnership. We love what the Soaring Eagle does and helps us with, and they're going to be participating in the parade as well.
So you mentioned Union Civica.
Mm-hmm.
Been around a little while, hasn't it?
Yeah, in 1945, 11 men came together, and they wanted to, there were 3 reasons why they formed, and I'll just say them real quick. One was for civil rights, of course. The second one was for educational attainment for their youth, because many of them were Spanish speakers, and they were falling behind in schools. And the third reason was just to make sure that they propagated their culture and heritage and kept it. They didn't lose it. And so that's why they primarily formed in 1945. And here we are 80 years later, and we're celebrating the 80th year, which is the theme of this year's parade and festival, celebrating the 80th anniversary of La Unión Cívica Mexicana.
And your Grand Marshal, or maybe we should say Grand Marshallette this year?
Yeah. Maria Jimenez Gomez, who owns Maria's Restaurant, she came to this country 50 years ago this month, and believe it or not, she's started the El Rancho Grande restaurant, and she had a bakery, Guadalupana Bakery, back on the south side of Saginaw, probably 40 years ago. And then she went on to have Maria's Restaurant on State Street. So she's really an entrepreneur who, at the same time while she was opening up these businesses, was working at the plant on Genesee. What was that plant? The GM, I forgot the name of it, but it's the main one where they had the Santa Claus up on the...
Yeah, oh.
Because it changed names. That's why it's throwing me off.
Yeah,
but everybody knows that plant. Well, she worked there and retired from there for 30 years while she's doing these businesses as well. So I mean, she really had an entrepreneurial mind that she came here to this country. I think she was only like 18, 19. So she's our parade grand marshal. We're real excited for her and congratulate her and her whole family because her brother owns Estrella's Bakery. Her other brother has an air heating and duct business, and her sister Chole runs El Rancho Grande.
She still has El Rancho Grande.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And Maria's.
Yeah, and like I said, their father's right in the midst of all of that at 97.
I should only hope.
Yeah, really.
All right, we're going to take a break and be back with Larry Rodarte's Cinco de Mayo celebration this weekend inside.
Rocket Grab Plus.
I want to go back to Union Civica Mexicana for a moment. If you look back at the 80 years of the organization, how has it changed, Larry, or has it?
Well, I think it's changed in the fact that in the 40s, of course, in the 50s, they were much more of an advocacy group, fighting for civil rights in our community. And particularly, they were fighting for the migrant workers, not only locally in Saginaw, but on a statewide level. When there was an injustice that was happening, they were right there writing letters to whatever community those migrant workers were in. And we have the documentation to prove this stuff, which we are working with the Castle Museum right now to actually have an exhibit. We were going to have one in September to coincide with our 80th anniversary. But we decided to not have it until 2026 because Sandy Schwan, who I had on my show just last month, was involved in a car accident, and she won't be able to, be with us for September. So I says, hey, I'm not doing this without Sandy because she was such an advocate to get the exhibit for them to agree with it, to do it. And so Jonathan Webb, the executive director of the Castle Museum, he and I talked, and I said, I would rather just hold off if Sandy's not going to be with us. And he said, this might work out perfect because, in the word he said, I can't say it, and I don't know if you can, Art, but it's because it's the 250th anniversary of the United States of America next year.
The sesquicentennial. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I said,
but it is the 250th.
Yeah, and that's telling the American story, and so it just might be perfect that we do that. So
that's good.
Yeah.
That's
so
good.
How it has changed though really is now we have moved into having the staple events that we have, like the Tamale Taste Off, the Cinco de Mayo, the Taco Fest, all involving food, of course. Because that's always a celebration, but like Dia de los Muertos, those are the signature events that we have that, really promote the culture and heritage. And that was part of one of the reasons why they formed in 1945. So who knows how that's going to change because of the political climate today. And it's been a difficult 2025 for us at the Union Civica, believe it or not, because when President Trump went into office, there were posts that said that people were targeting the Union Civica in our kitchen because we had undocumented workers. And I head up the kitchen, and I was born and raised here. Yeah. So, it was kind of funny, but we were notified by the county. We were notified by the UAW. And it was just a scare tactic. That's all. Nothing more.
I mean, and that's unfortunate. There was an unfortunate result of all of this, that a lot of organizations, nationalities, races, people, I don't know. I find my fellow man disappointing at times. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And I grew up, as you well know, in New York City on the streets of the Bronx. And you didn't grow up with those prejudices, otherwise you didn't survive.
Yeah.
Literally. I mean, and my parents always taught me to be colorblind, and you judge an individual on themselves, who they are, and how they react with you on their merits, not on what they look like, not where they came from, not what they believe in, and that's who I am.
Yeah.
And a lot of my fellow citizens disappoint me a lot. I don't know. I trace a lot of it back to the 60s when the flower generation, flower power, and all the protests that took place. And somehow we stopped teaching parents how to be parents.
Yeah.
We stopped teaching youngsters growing up how to be parents for the next generation. And I think we've seen the results of that,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
I agree. I totally agree.
It doesn't matter what your background is. It crosses all lines.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's for sure.
this is really not Mi Gente on air, ladies and gentlemen, but we're just kind of doing it.
Yeah.
Tell me about, let's talk about that for a minute. Mi Gente, where did that come from?
Well, believe it or not, this is our 30th year of
We had
publishing.
a lot of celebrations.
I know. And I should have had a float in the parade, right? And I don't even have one. It's because I'm so busy being the chairman of the actual event. But Mi Gente started 30 years ago. The idea came into my head because of the events on March 31st, 1995, which was, for us, Latinos in the country, was the day the music died. Selena died. Selena Quintanilla was murdered. And she was like...
She was an important figure, wasn't she?
Yeah, she sure was. And I remember back then, 30 years ago, that one of my coworkers asked me, Larry, was she really that big? And I remember looking at her and realizing she really doesn't understand. But it was like Elvis, when Elvis passed, for us.
Yeah.
And like...
But, in some ways, though, in some ways it happened to Elvis, too. She almost became bigger in death because she transcended those lines, those boundaries.
Yes, she did. Yeah, and I remember thinking, man, when she passed away, I thought, she's never going to fulfill her dream of crossing over now. And yet, she went way beyond that crossover. She transcended, like you said. And I don't know of any figure, really, that in death became bigger than in life. Elvis was big. Michael Jackson was
big,
and Michael Jackson was big. They didn't, they may have gotten bigger in a sense because their iconic status, but Selena was within the Tejano genre. That's who knew her. Mexicans, Mexican Americans, and now everybody in the world knows her.
It also propelled Tejano music, didn't it?
Yes, it did. And Tejano music has not been the same since she's been a part of it. She brought it to the forefront, though, for the nation, Most people didn't know what it was.
All right, we'll take a break, come back, finish our conversation as we chat with Larry Rodarte, Cinco de Mayo, this weekend in Saginaw.
WSGW is...
Studio with me is Larry Rodarte, and we are chatting about Cinco de Mayo and Union Civica Mexicana. We just talked a little bit about Tejano music, and there's another kind of music. I grew up with certain musical loves for no reason. Jewish kid from the Bronx, I fell in love with black gospel music and mariachi.
Oh, yeah.
Vincent Fernandez and folks like that. How big is mariachi today? Does it still have a place of prominence?
Oh, yeah, it's huge. Anytime there's mariachis, there's a fiesta. There's a party.
Oh, then, yeah.
And in Mexico, really, it is the love for, I think, their culture and heritage that you seek out the mariachi musicians, and you feel that vibrant music when you hear it. It makes you feel the love for country.
It's funny you say it that way, because the thing that attracted me to those genres of music, both the black gospel and the mariachi, even though the black gospel sense, it wasn't the belief being expressed by the music, but it was the spirit of the music.
Mm-hmm.
Mariachi, same way. I have no idea what they're saying,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
but there's a certain spirit that infects you. You know?
And you're saying that really well, because that's exactly how I feel. And I've grown up knowing it all my life. I remember in the late 60s, early 70s, Mom and Dad and their compadres, and they would, have evening parties, and you always heard Vicente Fernandez, the mariachi sound. And, like I said,
he was kind of the king of the hill, wasn't he?
He was the king of the hill. And it's funny because I traveled to Europe quite a bit, and I was really surprised that I learned that there was connections in Germany, in Serbia, to mariachi. I went to a trumpet festival in Serbia.
Really?
Believe it or not, in probably about 8 years ago. And when this family that I went with, they took me, and we were approaching the gate to pay, all of a sudden I heard Los Mañanitas, which is the Mexican birthday song. And I'm like, what is that doing here in Serbia? Yeah, can you believe it? But it turns out
Well,
there
but
were
at a trumpet festival, yeah.
yeah, at a trumpet festival, and it turns out that immigrants came from Mexico to Serbia, settled there, and that music, they love it. They love the mariachi music in Serbia.